the division that is close or actually operated by Maher al-Assad, al-Assad's brother in Latakia and the other coastal cities, that they have actually wanted to incite this violence in order to reach what we have reached through the weekend, this massacre of minorities, in order to continue with the of course, their efforts to delegitimize this new government.
All right, Balé, for now. Thank you very much. Well, let's bring in Hyvie Bouzo. Hyvie is Syrian. She's a broadcast journalist and the founder of the media company Yalla. Thank you very much for being with us, Hyvie. Good to see you.
Thank you for having me.
It would appear to some that the new president, Ahmed al-Sharaa, is living in a kind of a parallel reality, because the whole world has been watching these horrific videos coming out of Latakia over the weekend. Islamists, with weapons going home to home. We've seen the bodies of civilians, children in the streets. I mean, what do you make of his response to it all?
Well, definitely like what the gentleman was just saying, that it is disappointing because there were no condemnation, no clarity in the position about the atrocities that were committed that were very clear. The numbers of videos, the testimonies by many people, including a Syrian actress, Alawite Syrian actress, who talked about her own personal experience. Another known Alawite figure, her 3 brothers were murdered. So these Islamist elements are part of what is forming right now the new Syrian government and the security forces. So this is the exact fear that many of the people in Syria had. Of course, there is the joy of getting rid of the Assad regime and the Iranian-backed sectarian militias who also committed massive atrocities. But the fear was, and now it's proven to be unfortunately true, is that the replacement is going to have the same Islamist extremist element that is gonna, kill and slaughter people who disagree, or minorities who basically have their own religious beliefs. And unfortunately, we do have a reality in Syria that, yes, the whole situation started with Assad loyalists and possibly the involvement of the Iranian regime, the Islamic Republic of Iran. We know that also there are some elements from the Hezbollah that were trying to, go to the Syrian border because they are ready. They want to have, it's like a civil war. It's a sectarian war.
You think Iran and Hezbollah still have some influence in Syria?
I mean, Iran did announce that they have formed the so-called Islamic Front in Syria. They do want to continue to have their influence if possible, and they do have some Assad loyalists that are still in that part of Syria, and they would like to see this happening. So absolutely, this is in their interest. They want to start this type of civil sectarian war and ethnic cleansing, which is really, what we are seeing right now. But the problem is that we have those jihadists that are part of the new security forces in Syria, and that the new government in Syria did not deal with them as such. We have people from different countries that are not even Syrian fighting there, and there are Syrians who are Salafists and jihadists who want to, and we saw some of the videos on social media, including some people who were a part of the security elements. There was a fighter who said that there were 2 specific militias called the Hamzat and Amshat who were actually going and targeting Alawite civilians, slaughtering minorities, basically knowing that they are civilians, taking them out of their homes. So this is the reality that is happening right now. And, we have, the countries that are supporting each side, because we know that also Qatar has been supporting those security forces. They've been supporting these jihadist elements for a very long time, and the Iranian regime continues to do so.
On those foreign elements, we can see from the videos there are a lot of foreign fighters in Syria. Uyghurs from China, Chechens, Turkmen, even Algerians. I guess the question is, does al-Sharaa even control all these various militia?
I think this is the biggest question of them all right now, is that the fact that they cannot even control these elements that they have already. They took over Syria 3 months ago, and they had a lot of, things that they did, which are, making sure that they are controlling all of Syria. They created a new constitution that, makes only a Muslim could rule the country, that, we're basically trying to make sure that he is going to be controlling for 4 years. And now we're seeing that all of these different fears and basically the worries that the people who are secular and the minorities had about this takeover that was happening, and not creating an actual inclusion for all the people of the country, and not actually making an accountability for the atrocities that were committed by the former regime. And now we're seeing that these elements are completely taking things into their own hands, if we do believe that claim that the security forces were not involved in the massacres that we just saw took place.
Meanwhile, many innocent Syrians caught in the middle, as they have been for many years now, sadly. Hyvie, we appreciate it. Thank you very much indeed. Hyvie Bouzou there.
Thank you.
Well, Turkey's government is backing the line from Damascus and is blaming foreign elements like Iran for stirring up the unrest in Syria. President Erdogan is a strong supporter of Syria's interim president, Ahmed al-Sharaa. Some of the videos circulating online show Islamists committing atrocities while wearing uniforms which bear both the Syrian and the Turkish flag. Well, to talk more about that, we're joined by Yusuf Can. He's an analyst at the Middle East programme at the Wilson Centre. Thank you very much for being with us, Yusuf. So, Turkey is very much taking this Syrian government's line, as you might expect. But is there any acknowledgement in Turkey about the slaughter of hundreds of innocent civilians?
Thank you so much for having me. That's a great question, and honestly, not to the extent where we would expect from a government that accepts that there is massacres going on in Syria, meaning that from various government officials, including Hakan Fidan, the foreign minister, but also from his VP, from other political actors, including Erdogan's coalition partner, Devlet Bahçeli, who is the leader of the ultranationalist party, MHP. They have been since March 7th, since when these massacres started. They've been accusing foreign actors, as you mentioned. They've called it a provocation by foreign actors, by those who don't want peace in Syria, those who don't want a central government, a strong central government. So accusing other actors and factions for these atrocities that have been going on. In fact, they've been accusing the Turkish opposition for feeding fire to this
the Turkish government is accusing the Turkish opposition of stirring up sectarian violence inside Syria?
Inside Syria, as well as in Turkey, or potentially actually inciting violence. So obviously not Erdogan himself is doing this, but his supporters, both in journalistic context, as well as on social media, as well as analysts. So these actors have been accusing others and not taking any stance regarding the massacres against Alawites in Latakia or other parts of Western Syria. Today, Devlet Bahçeli, as I mentioned, made a statement accusing the opposition for inciting sectarian violence, but also calling on the Kurds, the Kurdish political elite in Turkey, to basically choose sides, whether they were the opposition in Turkey and therefore becoming part in this alleged provocation, or they're with the Turkish government and supporting Damascus and Ahmed Sharaa.
Right. Turkey's President Erdogan is very impatient that the Kurds in Syria should disarm and they should be incorporated into al-Sharaa's forces. Given what's just happened to minorities in Syria over the weekend, that looks increasingly unlikely, doesn't it?
Yes. Even though Mazlum Abdi made a grounded statement about what's been happening.
He's the SDF commander.
Yes, the SDF commander in northeast Syria made a more grounded statement about how al-Sharaa should take responsibility and engage with Western Syria and take control of the forces and start an investigation and so forth, not directly accusing him of the violence that's been going on. So that's a more productive approach from northeast Syria. But at the same time, a lot of Kurdish analysts, a lot of Kurdish activists, both located in northeast Syria or other parts of the world, have been very skeptic and honestly fearful of what's happening and asking themselves in the larger political realm about how comfortable they should feel about, basically disarming. Because if that were to be the case, if the Kurdish forces or the Kurdish population in Syria were to basically give up their arms, what if something similar happens to them by the jihadist Islamists or other different actors who have been killing Alawites in Latakia and other parts?
And I mean, it is in Turkey's interest, isn't it, to have a stable and secure Syria on its borders, if for no other reason than to have oil and gas pass through into Turkey from Iraq. Do you think that Ankara could play some kind of stabilizing role in Syria?
I think Ankara should play a stabilizing role in Syria, meaning that, yes, definitely Turkish security, Turkish interest definitely relies on a stable Syria. What kind of a government that can actually achieve that stabilization is a different question, but that's regardless of the government in Ankara, by the way. It's not just Erdogan. A secure and stable Syria is necessary for Turkish trade, is necessary for Turkish security forces to guarantee peace and security in the southern border, plus the population and the demographic and the refugee issue, plus a number of other issues, as you mentioned, the oil trade, logistics, tourism, and so forth. Turkey shares the largest border with Syria, the longest border with Syria. So any issue in Syria, any destabilizing factor in Syria directly affects the Turkish border, but also the Turkish state and the population, as we've seen in the past 15 years. So definitely Turkey can play a role, should play a role in achieving stability. However, that's not going to happen simply by disregarding what's happening to Alawites or other minorities in Syria, who are Syrians, by the way. People always gotta forget that Alawites or Kurds or every Shia or Sunni, everybody in Syria is
they're all
Syrian.
Syrians, quite, and they all deserve protection. Yusuf, we'll have to leave it there, but thank you. We appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, of course.
Yusuf Jan there at the Wilson Centre. And Bali Asladeen is with me in the studio, and of course, minorities in Syria, very, very nervous right now. It was interesting, on this programme yesterday, we spoke to an Alawite woman from Latakia, and she claimed that nobody was going after the Druze in Syria because of the very public pronouncements that the Israeli government have made about protecting the Druze.
Yes, definitely. The statements that we have heard from the Prime Minister and also from the Defense Minister over the past couple of weeks have apparently been the sole or one of the reasons why there is no conflict between the Druze and the HDS or the new Syrian government. We've seen what happened in Jaramana, for example, one of the suburbs of Damascus, where they have reached some agreement. But the issue is, I guess, much deeper than this, because it also exposes the Druze at some point to being accused of collaborating with the Israelis, being, of course, maybe calling them names like Zionists or Israelis or occupiers or any of the names that they call anyone that cooperates with the Israelis. And that's something that, of course, many Druze, even in Israel, that have some relations with the Druze in Syria, also express their concern about. Now, the interview that Ahmad al-Shara gave to Reuters today mentioned also Israel, and he responded to the statements that we have heard from Israel Katz, the defense minister, and also the foreign minister of Israel. He said that their claims that we are a jihadist regime that imposes a threat to Israel is nonsense. That what he said, and he added that they are the last ones, like Israel are the last ones to talk about such a thing because of what they have done to the people of Gaza, to the people of Lebanon throughout the past year and a half. That's what Ahmad al-Shara is saying. We see that the vocal, at least, back and forth between him and the Israeli politician is increasing week by week, month by month. We now hear him very clearly condemning the Israeli presence in the south of Syria and the Israeli comments over again.
And of course, we just had that conference in Jordan, and that basically was the outcome of that, the conference on Syria. They said Israel should withdraw immediately. All right, yes. Valia, thank you very much indeed. Valia Sladina. Well, Iran has strongly rejected accusations that it's behind the sectarian violence in Syria. The country's foreign minister condemned the attacks on the Alawites, who are also Shiites. Meanwhile, the United States continues to ramp up diplomatic pressure on Tehran. But at the same time, President Trump is leaving the door open for negotiations regarding Iran's nuclear program. Trump has acknowledged that he did send a letter to Ayatollah Khamenei calling for a new deal, and asked today about Moscow's role in those negotiations. Top Kremlin aide Dmitry Peskov said Tehran makes its own policy decisions. Well, to talk more about all of that, we're joined by Jason Brodsky. He's the policy director of the group United Against Nuclear Iran. Thanks for joining us, Jason. Good to see you as always. Let's start then with Syria. What do you make of it? Do you think Tehran still has some influence in Syria, and did it play any role in what happened in Latakia and coastal Syria over the weekend?
It's great to be with you, Laura. I think Iran's supreme leader has been signaling rhetorically since December that the Islamic Republic is not just going to go quietly into the night after Assad was ousted in Syria. And that's because preserving the supply routes through Syria is a core interest of the Islamic Republic to try to encircle Israel in a ring of fire and resupply Hezbollah after its losses. And we've seen the development of groups like the Islamic Resistance in Syria in recent weeks that have followed Khamenei's public commentary that the Syrian youth will take back their country. And that's code for Islamic Republic interference in Syria. And so I think that that's what we are seeing in these places. And Iran is going to try to assert itself and find opportunities to capitalize on the ongoing unrest there.
All right. Well, let's move to the nuclear dossier. President Trump does appear very keen, doesn't he, to sign a new nuclear agreement with Tehran. Do you think he'll be successful?
Well, right now, I think Iran and the United States are talking past each other when it comes to deals. The details matter in deals. And President Trump's longstanding position since his first term has been that the JCPOA framework is a fundamentally flawed framework and that he wants something longer in duration and more expansive. And some of his advisors in recent weeks, particularly the National Security Advisor, have been calling for the dismantling of Iran's nuclear program, akin to a Libya model from 2003. But the Islamic Republic, on the other hand, is talking about a JCPOA-like deal. And so this mismatch in demands is likely to cause confrontation, not a successful diplomatic outcome. And Laura, at the end of the day, I think all of us need to understand that the United States and the Islamic Republic are never going to come to a durable diplomatic understanding as long as Ali Khamenei is supreme leader and or a like-minded successor is in his chair. And that's a hard truth, but we have to deal with the Iranian regime the way it is, not the way we would hope it to be. And that's the reality.
Do you think that is something President Trump understands?
I think that every president since 1979 has come into office trying diplomacy with the Islamic Republic, but we've had a 46-year track record of absolute failure. And that we have to keep that history in mind here. Ali Khamenei is not going to wake up one day just because there's a certain president in office and change the fundamental pillars of the Iranian regime. He has built his career and built the Islamic Republic as a revolutionary. And so that is what we have to recognize, and we have to acknowledge the limits of what diplomacy can achieve with the Islamic Republic.
Can I get your view on what we heard from Qatar's Prime Minister over the weekend? He sat down to an interview with the very popular American journalist Tucker Carlson, and he was basically putting forward the view that there shouldn't be any military action in Iran, there shouldn't be any strikes on its nuclear sites, because that would contaminate the drinking water of millions of people in the Gulf. I mean, do you see some kind of collaboration here between Qatar and Tehran on the messaging?
Well, Qatar has been a partner of the Islamic Republic. It has a close relationship with the Islamic Republic. It has hosted IRGC officials and defense expos in its country, in its territory. And Qatar has been very problematic in its behavior for a long period of time. And I think it's there needs to be bipartisan recognition in Washington that we have to reassess our relationship with Qatar, given its support for terrorism that has been well documented over the years. Now, I don't remember Qatar expressing horror at the Houthis when they were hijacking commercial vessels in the Red Sea with the risk of environmental contamination from the lobbing of drones and missiles at commercial vessels carrying all sorts of products in that area. Where was Qatar then? So I do think it's rather interesting and quite frankly not surprising that Qatar would suggest this because at the end of the day, just like it's trying to protect Hamas, it's trying to protect the Islamic Republic of Iran.
Well, on the Houthis, as you brought them up, the Iranian-backed group in Yemen have said that they will restart their attacks on Israel as early as tomorrow. Do you think Iran is directing this? Where does Iran stand with regard to this?
The Islamic Republic has long had advisors from the IRGC who are on the ground in Yemen resourcing and advising the Houthis on their attacks. I think of Abdul Reza Shalai, who is a senior IRGC commander responsible for Yemen, who has been on the ground directing and helping the Houthis in their attacks against U.S. and commercial vessels. And so Iran's fingerprints are all over this. And the Houthis are playing with fire because, according to press reports, the Trump administration has been considering whether to engage in more punishing strikes than were the case under the Biden administration. So the Houthis have not just the Israelis to worry about, but the United States.
Jason Brodsky, always a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Now, an Israeli team is in Doha for talks with Qatari and Egyptian mediators on the stalled hostage and ceasefire deal with Hamas. Hamas accused Israel of violating the deal by not withdrawing from the Philadelphia corridor, which borders Egypt. Well, the US Middle East envoy Steve Witkoff is not due to arrive in Doha until Wednesday. Meanwhile, the US hostage envoy Adam Boehler has been giving interviews to American and Israeli news channels, including I-24 News. We've got more on that in this report.
I think that a conversation and a dialogue is very important.
A new face in hostage ceasefire talks, facing the media. After his daring attempt to hold talks with Hamas away from Israel, American hostage envoy Adam Boehler has completed a media blitz on Israeli and American TV, including an interview to I-24 News' Amichai Stein, explaining why the US shifted its tactics away from the long-standing policy of no negotiations with terrorists.
I think our view as a team was that it's very, very difficult to really understand another side without sitting in front of them. Again, we discussed it. We don't think meeting somebody is a concession. That's not what a concession is.
A Hamas official said on Sunday that Boehler's talks revolved around Idan Alexander, the New Jersey native and IDF lone soldier, believed to be the last living American hostage in Gaza.
The United States uses a strong hand when we have people that have our citizens, and that includes allies like Israel. And so we're not going to get pushed around, I can tell you that. But we are going to get our people back.
The Israeli government was angered by Boehler's negotiation tactics, especially Israeli Strategic Affairs Minister Ron Dermer, who supposedly lashed out at Boehler for going behind Israel's back.
Ron explained to me some of his concern. I said that I understood the concern. I don't live right now in a country that is surrounded by people that want that country not to exist. And so for him to get frustrated or concerned when I'm engaging, I think it's totally normal.
In an interview with CNN, Boehler caused a stir with his description of Hamas.
Maybe I would see them and say, look, they don't have horns growing out of their head. They're actually guys like us. They're pretty nice guys.
Something he was later forced to clarify on social media, highlighting the evil of Hamas and emphasizing that they are, in fact, bad people. But he reiterated his stance that the US has its own priorities.
At the same time, we're the United States. We're not an agent of Israel. We have specific interests at play.
But one thing he told every news outlet, including I-24 News, is that he remains optimistic that a deal can be done and can be done soon.
But the reason I'm optimistic is because the President of the United States, President Trump, was elected. It changed everything in the region. And so I think there's an answer here. And I think the answer is that Hamas lays down their arms, we exchange prisoners, and they go into a long-term truce.
Pretty nice guys. That did raise quite a lot of eyebrows here in Israel, I can assure you. Well, with me in the studio this hour, our correspondent, Nicole Zedek. And Nicole, to be fair, Bola did walk those comments back. And Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, someone with a bit more foreign policy experience, perhaps, has now waded in as well to try and correct what Bola said.
It does seem like the United States is working to do some damage control following this media blitz that we saw just yesterday from Adam Boehler, causing quite the stir here in Israel out of all these contradictory remarks that Boehler made to these various different news outlets. So now Secretary of State Marco Rubio just moments ago in a gaggle of reporters stating that this direct meeting between Boehler with the Hamas terror group, this was a one-off. He said it was worth it for Boehler to actually try and get somewhere, but it didn't actually bear any fruit, this according to the Secretary of State. So it didn't go anywhere. It's not going to go anywhere. And according to Rubio, he said, I applaud Boehler's efforts for trying to make something happen. That's what he does as the hostage envoy. But the main point man for these ongoing negotiations is still Steve Witkoff. And so that's why we're seeing more movement with Steve Witkoff heading to the region today. And even before the Middle East envoy, Steve Witkoff, came here to the region before he gave some interviews with different outlets as well, speaking about the ongoing efforts when these meetings with Doha. There's already an Israeli delegation there as well. He said, listen, we need to have deadlines on the next phase of the deal. So that's hopefully what's going to come in. I want to add the first public negotiations between all of the different mediators since January 20th when Trump came into office, and since the ceasefire deal actually came intact, with Witkoff being the main point man behind this ceasefire in the first place. And so if it comes with the United States and Israel extending phase one of this ceasefire, if it comes to Hamas wanting to see phase two actually implemented, we might learn some more of that as these negotiation efforts do kick off in Doha.
Right, and so it won't be kicking off properly until the middle of this week, Nicole. But we've had more demands from Hamas today, haven't we? They are saying that the IDF must leave the Philadelphia corridor.
Yeah, no new demands coming from the terror group. And according to Hamas, in a statement earlier today, they said, we've given some leeway where we're trying to work with these negotiations, and we're showing flexibility when it comes to negotiations. But what is that flexibility? They say we still want a complete end to the war, moving into phase two and a complete withdrawal of Israeli troops, which are still stationed on the Philadelphia corridor between Egypt and Gaza. And this is a non-starter not only for Israel, but it seems from the United States as well. Once again, this interview from Witkoff before he came to the region, he says that it's a non-starter for Israel to remove because they need to see not only Hamas disarm, but leave the Gaza Strip as well. This isn't a new statement coming from the Trump administration or Witkoff himself, but this is certainly in line with the Israeli positioning and something that they want to see, a complete disarmament, as well as a removal of Hamas from the Gaza Strip before any sort of negotiations on the ceasefire can continue.
Yeah, we're getting lots of different messages from the US administration, aren't we? Perhaps it's a negotiating tactic, we don't know. Nicole, thank you very much indeed. Nicole Zedek there. Well, let's get some regional perspective now. We're joined by Dalia Ziada. She's an Egyptian scholar and a senior fellow at the Jerusalem Center for Security and Foreign Affairs. Thank you very much for being with us, Dalia. Tell us, how much of a role is Egypt playing in this latest round of talks, and how much leverage do the Egyptians have right now over Hamas?
Thank you so much, Laura, and always a pleasure to be with you. The scene we are seeing right now in terms of negotiations is actually, the main title we can give to it is lack of cooperation and lack of confidence between the different parties involved in the negotiation. I'm not speaking about Hamas and Israel because, well, of course, there is lack of confidence between them and lack of cooperation. But the problem is that now even the mediators, including the United States, Qatar, Egypt, and other Arab countries who are also having an influence on this, there is huge divisions between their perceptions of how this situation should be solved. Also, it seems to me that inside the American administration itself, there is some kind of different visions conflicting with each other about how the situation should be resolved. On one side, we see Witkoff and Rubio on one side, like taking a certain position on Hamas, while Boiler on the other side taking a different position. So there is lack of confidence. First, lack of confidence from the United States in the ability of Arab countries, especially Qatar and Egypt, on making any progress in these negotiations. There is lack of confidence between Egypt and Qatar after the failed Arab summit, the emergency summit they held last week, and that did not actually reach or discuss the crux of the issue, which is how to remove Hamas from Gaza and disarm Gaza in order to be able to continue. And there is also lack of confidence between Qatar and other Arab countries who also participated in the Arab Summit and agree with the perception or with the opinion that says Hamas has to be removed first before we take any steps forward. One issue that actually may become a big topic in the negotiations that are going to happen in the coming few days with Witkoff's visit to the region, I think has to do very much with the second phase of the negotiations of the ceasefire, the second phase of the ceasefire, and which includes Israel's withdrawal from the Philadelphia corridor, which is something, unfortunately, Egypt supports. Although it's not working in Egypt's favor in any way, the only beneficiary from such a move will be Hamas. Hamas is just dreaming about Israel leaving the Philadelphia corridor so it can go back to arming itself and regrouping and resuming their jihad on Israel. And as you know, there is no ceasefire.
Would Egypt really let that happen, particularly when it's got the eyes of the international community upon it? Would it take that risk?
Egypt has been already calling for Israel or the Israeli troops to leave the Philadelphia corridor. So it's one of the demands of Egypt that also Hamas agrees with. However, if you look, just look at the map. If you look from outside, you will realize that the Israeli troops being in control of the Philadelphia corridor is not only important for the safety and security of Israel, but it's even equally and even more important for the security and safety of Egypt, because it also prevents Hamas elements from leaking into Sinai, similar to what we have seen in 2012 and 2013. But Egypt is, the Egyptian government or the Egyptian political leadership, in particular, President el-Sisi, he wants to satisfy the domestic audience who still have very hostile sentiments towards Israel, unfortunately. So he's adopting this narrative.
Dalia, great to talk to you as always. Thank you very much indeed. Dalia Ziada there.
Thank you.
Well, with us now, Gidi Greenstein is a former peace negotiator under the former Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Barak. He's also the author of Insights, Peacemaking in the Oslo Process, 30 years and counting. Thank you for being with us, Gidi. It all seems to have ground to a halt, doesn't it? We're hoping that the talks will pick up again on Wednesday. But at the moment, we've got a lot of different messaging coming out. We've got a lack of trust with Qatar, with Egypt, and with the Israeli government, it has to be said as well. Do you think that the Trump administration's failed attempt to negotiate directly with Hamas has hurt efforts to get the hostages home?
I actually don't think it is a failed attempt, and let me explain why. When I was part of the negotiation team, the outside, the world, the Arab side, always thought that we were harmonized and synchronized and coordinated and orchestrated. But in fact, within us, there were different voices and different groups pulling in different directions. I do want to believe that within the Trump administration, because of the structure of the administration, they are coordinated. They're also a very, very small team, a handful of people that is leading this diplomacy. And within, if this is the case, I would suggest that possibly the negotiations, the direct engagement through Qatar of Adam Borler with Hamas was a signal. It's called signaling in negotiations. Was a signal to Israel that the United States is not in its pocket. And he said it very clearly, stunningly clearly. He said, we are not an agent of Israel. That means we have our interest, Israel has its interest, and Israel better not assume that America will follow its footsteps. And I think that in this respect...
Do you think that the Israeli government is under that illusion?
Yes, I think that the Israeli government, what I've heard was a kind of projecting the image that America and Israel are fully coordinated, and therefore Israel has some sort of an unlimited sort of an approval to do whatever it wants in Gaza for as long as it wants. And this is why we have seen the Israeli government really dragging their feet on the second phase of the deal, on the further exchange of hostages in exchange for prisoners, etc., etc. Meaning there is no sense of urgency coming out of Jerusalem. I don't think anybody can say that. And the Trump administration is basically signaling, guys, we have our own timeline. We have other interests in the Middle East. We want to build a stronger relationship with Saudi Arabia. We want to move ahead with some of our other regional agenda. We want to create what is called IMEC, the India, Middle East, Europe corridor. We have all these other things at play, and you, Israel, better take it into account. And I believe that that's why Ron Dermer was so upset.
Okay, do you think that the Trump administration then will force Israel to accept all of Hamas's demands when it comes to phase 2 of the deal, a full withdrawal, the end of the war, and letting Hamas stay in power?
I think the astonishing part about what we've heard about Adam Boller's negotiations is that he actually negotiated with Hamas Israel's demands, that Hamas withdraws from Gaza, hands over power. There is basically a full exchange of prisoners, full release of hostages. This is what Israel wants. So if the Americans are actually representing Israeli demand, why is the government of Israel so upset? Why are they so angry with Trump actually pushing what the government of Israel is demanding? And the answer is, I believe, that there is totally different timelines between the American perspective and the Israeli perspective, if we even assume that the Israeli side wants to move forward with some sort of an agreement about the future of Gaza. We knew from day one, the implementation of the second phase of the deal requires its own agreement. We need an agreement about the implementation of the second phase of the deal. It's a very complicated phase.
So just to be clear, Israel should agree to end the war and let Hamas remain in power?
Of course, this war will have to end.
And Hamas, even if it means Hamas staying in power?
Every war has to end.
Even if it means Hamas staying in power?
The Israelis and the Americans and all Arab countries believe and agree that Hamas has to leave, because there cannot be a reconstruction of Gaza when Hamas is in power. If Hamas is in power, there will be another war and another conflict, and anything that will be rebuilt in Gaza will be destroyed. Okay. And that's why Hamas has to leave. The Egyptians understand it, the Saudis, the Emiratis, the Jordanians, everybody understands it. The question is, what are the terms of the departure of Hamas from Gaza? And I think this is the key point that everybody needs to focus on. How do we get Hamas out of Gaza? Now, the Israeli demand is clearly illogical. It's asking Hamas to leave, and then a ceasefire will be discussed.
All right.
That's not going to happen. Clearly, the departure of Hamas is going to be negotiated together with a ceasefire, which is what the Americans are saying to us. It's so simple, it's so clear, and so straightforward, and that's why they're moving ahead with it.
Okay, Gidi, we have to leave it there, but thank you. We appreciate it. Gidi Greenstein there.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Well, the families of some of the hostages have their own demands, and they are demanding that Israel switch back on the electricity to the Gaza Strip. The Israeli government cut electricity supplies yesterday. Let's get more on that with our correspondent, Emmanuel Honora. She's down at Hostages Square in Tel Aviv. Emmanuel.
Laura, I'm here at the protest near the IDF headquarters, where you can see an encampment of tents that have been here now for 2 nights, and right next to it is a major protest. And with me is also a hostage family member, Rotem Cooper, who is here with a picture of his father, Amiram Cooper, 84, who was taken from Nir Oz on the 7th of October, and who was killed, who was murdered by Hamas in captivity in Gaza. Rotem, thank you so much for joining us today. I'd like to ask you first, it's been so long now that there's been this fight ongoing now. There's been so long now that this fight has been ongoing for the release of all of the hostages. What do you have to say about the fact that there still hasn't been a deal to see all of the hostages return home?
We are here because we are in a very unique situation right now. There is a ceasefire. We released 25 live hostages, and we brought to burial another 8. The reason why you see so many people here is that because we're now done kind of with the first stage, and the question, are we going back to war or we continue with the negotiation and releasing more hostages? It's very clear that the war was not good for the hostages. We had 41 hostages, including my father, that were alive when they were abducted to Gaza, and they're no longer alive. My father, Amiram Cooper, survived 4 months. He was taken when he was 84 years old, and against all odds, he survived 4 months. But eventually, he died. And the people that were with him, the hostages, Chaim Perry, Yoram Metzger, Avram Munder, Alex Danzig, Yegev Buchtov, Nadav Popelwell, they all died from bombing of the IDF. So the war is not good for the hostages. We were explaining that, we were shouting that a year ago here. People argue with us. Unfortunately, the number speaks. 1 out of 4 of the hostages that were taken alive to Gaza is no longer alive. 1 out of 4 died because of the war, for various reasons. Some of them were starved, some of them were hit by munition, some of them were murdered straight by Hamas, but they were all alive on the week that they were taken, including Shiri Bibas and Ariel Bibas and Kfir Bibas that were alive for more than a month. If we had a negotiation and come to an agreement early enough, we could have got all of those people out alive. 41 people that made it alive. It's very clear that the war is not good for the hostages. It's very clear. Now we need to decide. We have another 24 live hostages in Gaza as we speak, altogether 59. Are we going back to war? And remember, last time we were in a ceasefire, that was in November of 23. That's more than a year ago. So if we're going back to war, it's going to be many, many months, maybe more, maybe years before there's going to be another ceasefire, another opportunity to release the hostages. Everybody, I think, understand, including the Prime Minister, that the only way to get the soldiers, and the young men is through an agreement. You know, maybe we can release more people, like we are very successful recently. It's amazing. We got 25 of them. But to get the last soldiers, we would need to come to stop the war and come with an agreement. There's simply no way we're going to get the last soldier any other way. And everybody knows that, and I think that's why you see them here today.
All right, Rotem Cooper, thank you very much for being with us tonight. So as you can hear, Laura, this is one of many voices here tonight who are really trying to voice that they want to see a deal, to see the return of the 59 hostages dead and alive. And the only way to get to that is with a deal and not by returning to war. This is what they say.
Thanks, Emmanuel.
Back to you.
Thank you very much, Emmanuel Honorade. Now, Turkey and the United Arab Emirates are on opposite sides of the war in Sudan, and both are accused of prolonging a war that has killed tens of thousands and displaced millions. Sudan is now taking the UAE to court over allegations it's arming the RSF militia, a charge the UAE strongly denies. One of Turkey's largest defence companies, meanwhile, is accused of selling arms to the Sudanese armed forces in a clear violation of European and American sanctions. Russia, too, is fighting for influence and has just signed a deal for a naval base in Sudan. Well, to talk about all of that, we're joined by Mariam Waba. She's a research analyst at the Foundation for Defence of Democracies. Thank you for being with us, Mariam. So break it down for us, if you would. How is the power struggle between the UAE, Turkey and Russia prolonging the war in Sudan?
Great to be with you today, Laura. Look, we're about to enter month 23 of a brutal civil war that has ravaged the African country of Sudan. And while we've seen some movement on the battlefield, the diplomatic route has really stalled. And the reason for that is you have countries that are involved in the arming and military training of both warring sides. The Sudanese armed forces and the rebel forces that are fighting each other in this civil war. What we know is limited, but we can make some assertions with regards to who is arming who. We've seen some reports from UAE. We've seen some reports that UAE has armed the RSF. We've seen, like you said, some Turkish military companies that have backed the warring sides. Russia has done the same from the start of the war. We've seen the Wagner Group become involved both in the military arming of the RSF, but also in policing the gold mines that are crucial to Sudan's economy. The one element that's missing here is Iran. In the period between 2023 and 2024, in a 7-month period, the State Department has tracked 7 flights between Sudan and Tehran. And we knew 4 of these at least 4 of them were carrying weapons to Sudan. So all in all, there's crucial evidence that suggests that there's all kinds of nations backing the 2 warring parties.
And the Sudanese people, of course, are paying the price. Mariam, who is winning this battle for influence, and why is Sudan so important to so many countries?
Look, it's going to be hard to tell who is actually winning on the battlefield and behind the diplomatic curtains here, because everybody is so intricately involved and there's a lot happening behind the scenes. And these nation states are arming sanctioned warring parties. When it comes to Sudan, there's one thing to think about is a strategic location. Sudan has around 530 miles of the coast on the Red Sea, which is why we're seeing Russia, UAE, Turkey, and others vie for that port access for building military navy bases, and that Red Sea access is crucial to their geopolitical standing.
Mariam Wahba at the FDD, great to talk to you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, an American freeze on foreign aid means that dozens of Afghan women who fled the Taliban to study in Oman are now being deported back to Afghanistan. The US-funded scholarships were abruptly terminated after President Trump's order to cut foreign aid programs. After it swept to power in 2021, the Taliban outlawed all work and education for women and girls, and it continues to impose draconian restrictions on women. Well, to talk more about that, we're joined by Mariam Wardak. She's the founder of the NGO Her Afghanistan. Thanks for being with us, Mariam. So these young women were studying science, maths, technology, very educated young women. They now face a really bleak future. Can anything be done to stop this?
I mean, first of all, it's such a wonderful opportunity to talk about this, and I'm so grateful that your show is highlighting this issue, because the Afghanistan issue is slowly dying in the media. And yes, there's so much to be done. I mean, we can continue international pressures on platforms, including United Nations, and also we can do engagements with the moderate elements. I remember on the show we spoke previously that there's multiple fractions of the Taliban, and there is a moderate element, the young gentlemen who have engaged with foreigners, who've studied abroad, and who want advancement for the young women and their families. And then you have support for remote education to provide opportunities for these young girls to continue some sort of education. In the United States, I'm not sure what could be done, and I don't think anything that I would advise would probably even be legal, because it's such in dire circumstance. And unfortunately, I think Afghans around the world, especially in the United States, have to be on their toes, even be prepared with a second plan in case something like this continues and other programs end.
Have you had contact with any of these women at all, I'm wondering?
These women, unfortunately, I have not been in touch with. We do have women from Her Afghanistan groups who have tech scholarships around the world, mostly in Europe and in the STAN countries, and nothing has, thank God, has happened to them. I have always put out calls if any of the girls in the United States or in Canada do need any assistance from Her Afghanistan, that I'm very much available to try to navigate discussions, especially with the State Department, and see if they could possibly do anything.
And just to go back to your perspective, do you think the world has been taking the wrong approach, saying that the Taliban can't be dealt with, we have to just, they're beyond the pale the way they treat women and girls? Do you think that now is the time to really start engaging with them, just to try and alleviate the suffering of people there?
I think the Taliban only gained popularity by being extremist towards women, how they are mentality and how they've won the war, etc. Nobody's talking about that. So the only thing that they could talk about is being this barbarian towards women. So they want to continue this act. And I have to tell you that many elements of these groups on the ground over there are not this way. We have seen, we have engaged with certain groups to alleviate certain situations, such as these underground schools that are taking part. Many of them know that it's happening, but they turn a blind eye to it because many of them want their own girls and women or wives or daughters to be educated. And a fraction of these gentlemen have been raised during the past 20 years. So yes, we do have the extremists, the ones who've been in the mountains fighting, and then you have the Doha fraction that has been continuing to discuss with the international groups, and then you have the technocrats who were educated abroad and then returned.
So there
is
a glimmer of hope. I'm sorry to cut you off, Mariam. We're out of time. Mariam Wardak, Her Afghanistan. Thanks. Want to stay on top of the news no matter where you are? Introducing i24 News' brand new news website. On our website, you'll find all the latest articles, interviews, and live broadcasts. Everything you need to know right at your fingertips, whenever you want it. So what are you waiting for? Download the i24 News app today.
How do you get your news? How do you know what sources to trust? And to paint a clear picture of the entire story, you need a breakdown of the constant stream of events, top stories, expert analysts, and the best journalists bringing you real voices on the ground. We're breaking it all down on The Rundown. Get the facts, stay informed, and be a voice of reason for the Middle East.
Introducing the brand new i24 News Video On Demand app. You'll have instant access to all our programs, reports, in-depth discussions, and expert commentaries, all at your fingertips, whenever you want it. So what are you waiting for? Download the i24 News Video On Demand app today.
Por la autoconstrucción de viviendas y garantizar el acceso a la seguridad de los compañeros.
Everybody ready? Taking a stand with a difference, protesters and some hostage families sleep outside Israel's defense headquarters yet again, urging security leaders to quickly secure the next phase of the hostage ceasefire deal. An Israeli team heads to the Qatari capital. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio says the U.S. hostage envoy's direct meeting with the Hamas terror group in Doha was a one-off situation and as of now has not borne fruit. Adam Boehler himself pushing back against intense criticism from Jerusalem behind the scenes. And U.S. immigration agents arrest one of the main leaders of the anti-Israel protests at Columbia University as President Donald Trump follows through on his promise to crack down on these demonstrations. This is the rundown on I24 News. I'm Benita Levine. Israel is today sending a delegation to Doha for a fresh round of talks on extending the fragile ceasefire in Gaza so it can secure the release of 59 hostages held in terror captivity for more than 17 months. 24 of the hostages are believed to be alive, including American Idan Alexander. They are all supposed to be freed in the next stages of the deal, but details have yet to be finalized. Israel cutting off aid to the Strip to try to pressure Hamas to agree to a deal, maintaining there is enough aid accumulated in the Palestinian enclave. Meanwhile, there have been a range of responses to the U.S. efforts to conduct separate, direct talks with Hamas in Qatar in recent weeks, many wanting to know why Washington would engage directly with a designated terror group and if those discussions would help ensure the release of all the hostages. So for more, it's a pleasure to welcome to studio Major General in the Reserves, Eitan Dangot, former military secretary to 3 Israeli defense ministers and the former coordinator of government activities in the Palestinian territories in the IDF, and our correspondent, Balich Sladin. Gentlemen, thank you both so much for being here. So the big question to start, 59 hostages in captivity, 24 are believed to be alive. What is the best strategy to get them back home safely?
Maybe I will surprise you. Each strategy that will continue and renew the discussions under some new conditions, and I find out that, in my opinion, the United States put a new condition. We are stopping the release of 2 or 3. We are not giving opportunity now to have such kind of block that blocked the negotiation, and they are going or 1 or 2 activities that released everybody. And I think which system you are using to reach those targets has to get the support. And what does it mean? It means that Israel, I think, should change. Whether the cabinet of Israel, and above all Benjamin Netanyahu, is putting a super goal to release of the hostages, he can do it in a new ways. You don't have to use the same systems that you use for the first stage. What does it mean again? It means now the renew, whether even I'm not angry from the fact the United States even spoke with Hamas for one shot. Okay, but if it's opened the door and the message from United States put very clearly, I think it moved Israel from a very unclear direction to a very important route which is leading to this kind of goal. Now, the ball is returning back to the area of Israel, and Israel has to lead it. United States, in my opinion, navigate Israel back to a direction to show it the way, show the target. You can see it by your eyes and not by see it as a vision for a long time future, because in a long time vision, you will not see any one of these hostages back.
Balich, I want to bring you in here because much has been made of the move by Israel to cut aid coming through to the enclave, electricity as well in recent days. Talk us through the response and how it's impacting decisions being made by Hamas as we speak.
Well, at least until now, they say that that doesn't affect their position and that does not pressure them. They still say that the only way to bring back the hostages or to release the hostages is through a deal that would be the deal that they talk about, the exchange for the hostages with the Palestinian prisoners in the Israeli jails. Currently, the aid is not entering Gaza, and yesterday the electricity as well, as we understand, since October 7th, the electricity does not flow into Gaza, only for the water desalination facility in Deir al-Balah. And today the head of the council, or the mayor of Deir al-Balah, said that the water desalination there has dropped significantly in its operation to the percentage of 85%. So less water is actually being provided in this water desalination in Deir al-Balah. That's what he is saying. Maybe in the future, in the coming days even, Israel will start also cutting the water from the north of the Gaza Strip in order to push the Palestinians that have returned to their back to the center of the Gaza Strip. Currently, the negotiations apparently are going to be focused on the extension of the first phase of the deal. Israel still wants to get more hostages out of Gaza before it resumes war. I don't see the current situation to lead anywhere to the second phase of the deal that will require Israel to actually fully withdraw from the Gaza Strip and, of course, declare the end of the war. It hasn't happened in the past 2 weeks, and it will not happen apparently now, only if Hamas actually agree to disarmament, something that apparently is very, very improbable for now.
Very unlikely indeed.
If I would like to add something more. In my former job, I know exactly what is the meaning for Gaza of these kind of steps. First of all, it's not going to be a game changer for the immediate situation. It's the consequences and also state of mind that put Hamas, that in the coming 2 months, because many things will enter to Gaza, you will have a big problem, not because stopping the last line of electricity. It means that beside non-electricity, you will not have any kind of fuel for all the activities that produce electricity in other places in order to serve your organization for your main goal, to kill or to make a bloodshed. And it means that Hamas look at it for the medium or the long range. And I think it's covering the arena between Israel to Hamas very clear. When we are coming to a stage where Israel renew the battlefield or the war, I am not telling it to do it now. No, now you have to release the hostages. But Hamas, if you continue, you will have a main problem with fuel and other things for your own organization, because Hamas doesn't have any kind of responsibility towards the population in Gaza. Because you know why? At the past, from 2007, Israel solved Hamas all the problems of the civil life while supplying these kind of things. Now the answer is too late and too light that Israel made it, but it's a message for the future.
We're going to take a deeper look at that in a short while. Stay with us right now, though. I want to check in with our correspondent, UNRWA. She joins us from Tel Aviv, where protesters and some hostage families have been sleeping outside yet again, urging security leaders to quickly get to the next phase of the ceasefire deal. What is the latest? What are they telling you there in Tel Aviv?
Benita, it is indeed going into now the third night. These tents are still here. And in fact, I would say that even since yesterday, there are even more tents. And this is part of a protest that has been dubbed Operation Kiryat Cordon, which Kiryat meaning the IDF headquarters, with different encampments around and surrounding the complex of the IDF headquarters, and right next to it, the daily protest that happens around here in near the IDF headquarters, which is much bigger than usual. The protesters are coming here in order to keep up the pressure on the Israeli government in order to push for a deal to see the remaining 59 hostages still held captive in Gaza end of the war, and calling for saying that the war is not the way to release the hostages. They want to see a deal. They want to make sure that a deal is what brings home their loved ones, their relatives. And we saw all types of people here. Earlier, we saw teenagers who have been missing school, who had to get 16-year-olds who had to get permission from their parents in order to sleep here, and who are going to sleep here again for the third night. So this really is another hostage families protest, but it really has taken on a whole new form. And many of them also saying that they're not necessarily upset about the U.S. administration being having talks, direct communication with Hamas. They say whatever it takes in order to get their loved ones back home, Benita.
Meanwhile, an Israeli negotiating team is heading to the Qatari capital. Talk us through some of the expectations, obviously cautious optimism.
Cautious optimism is the only way of putting it. We did hear Steve Witkoff say that there needs to be deadlines. So this is the U.S. administration really trying to clamp down on what needs to be done in order to secure a hostage deal. And also seeing reports that there were Marco Rubio saying that, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio saying that there weren't there was the talks, direct talks with Hamas were not fruitful. But again, very cautious optimism with the start of these talks again. So we'll just have to wait and see, Benita, in the meantime, what will come of it.
Live from Tel Aviv, thank you so much, correspondent Emmanuel Honora. Thank you. And still with the story, Israeli government officials have reportedly asked the Trump administration for clarification after U.S. hostage envoy Adam Boehler gave a string of interviews to American and Israeli news channels, including I-24 News. He has stood by his decision to hold private talks with Hamas, angering Jerusalem, and he has left the door open for further talks. More in this report by Joe Brown.
I think that a conversation and a dialogue is very important.
A new face in hostage ceasefire talks, facing the media. After his daring attempt to hold talks with Hamas away from Israel, American hostage envoy Adam Boehler has completed a media blitz on Israeli and American TV, including an interview to I-24 News' Amichai Stein, explaining why the US shifted its tactics away from the long-standing policy of no negotiations with terrorists.
I think our view as a team was that it's very, very difficult to really understand another side without sitting in front of them. Again, we discussed it. We don't think meeting somebody is a concession. That's not what a concession is.
A Hamas official said on Sunday that Boehler's talks revolved around Idan Alexander, the New Jersey native and IDF lone soldier, believed to be the last living American hostage in Gaza.
The United States uses a strong hand when we have people that have our citizens, and that includes allies like Israel. And so we're not going to get pushed around, I can tell you that. But we are going to get our people back.
The Israeli government was angered by Boehler's negotiation tactics, especially Israeli Strategic Affairs Minister Ron Dermer, who supposedly lashed out at Boehler for going behind Israel's back.
Ron explained to me some of his concern. I said that I understood the concern. I don't live right now in a country that is surrounded by people that want that country not to exist. And so for him to get frustrated or concerned when I'm engaging, I think it's totally normal.
In an interview with CNN, Boehler caused a stir with his description of Hamas.
Maybe I would see them and say, look, they don't have horns growing out of their head. They're actually guys like us. They're pretty nice guys.
Something he was later forced to clarify on social media, highlighting the evil of Hamas and emphasizing that they are, in fact, bad people. But he reiterated his stance that the US has its own priorities.
At the same time, we're the United States. We're not an agent of Israel. We have specific interests at play.
But one thing he told every news outlet, including I-24 News, is that he remains optimistic that a deal can be done and can be done soon.
But the reason I'm optimistic is because the President of the United States, President Trump, was elected. It changed everything in the region. And so I think there's an answer here. And I think the answer is that Hamas lays down their arms, we exchange prisoners, and they go into a long-term truce.
So for the latest, let's go live to our senior U.S. correspondent, Mike Wagenheim. He joins us from the State Department in Washington. And Mike, the latest to weigh in, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio saying the U.S. hostage envoy's direct meeting with Hamas was a one-off, trying to quell some tensions very quickly, it seems. The latest, what can you tell us?
Yeah, Marco Rubio on his way to Jeddah to participate in the next round of U.S.-Russia talks on a possible resolution to the Russia-Ukraine war. He'll also meet with Saudi leadership there on regional issues. But Rubio saying, yeah, it's one-off. It didn't bear any fruit, at least not so far. But that one-off comment, even that's a contradiction from what Adam Boehler said over the weekend, which is he said something to the effect of these talks, are wrapped up for now. But if I'm in the area, you never know. So Boehler was expressing some inference there that the talks could continue under some circumstances. This is part and parcel here of conflicting messages from various actors within the Trump administration about the ceasefire, about a hostage deal. Leaves you wonder at some points in time who's in charge, who's dictating the talks, what direction they're really going in. If the U.S. is going behind Israel's back, well, are various members of the Trump administration maybe circling around each other here in pursuing a ceasefire and broader hostage release deal here. But at least for the time being, the top diplomat, at least defined in the hierarchy officially, says that these talks were one-off and they're done.
Certainly this part of the world watching to see how it all unfolds. Talking about who's in charge, Mike, turning to the latest on tensions between Marco Rubio and Elon Musk, their disagreements over DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency, in the spotlight during that recent cabinet meeting, raising questions as to who exactly is calling the shots, so to speak. What are you learning there?
Marco Rubio, he's been put in a really difficult spot here. I mean, he was approved by unanimously in the Senate. You can't get the Senate to do anything unanimously, let alone approve a Trump administration designee. So he had broad support throughout the Senate in his ascension to the Secretary of State role. Really a wonk when it comes to foreign policy. This has been one of his domains, and I believe he thought when he was brought aboard here that he would be the one stamping foreign policy for the Trump administration, really designing it and cultivating it. Well, Trump named a bunch of different foreign envoys. Trump has its own opinions about foreign policy, which sometimes change day to day or hour to hour. And then you throw Elon Musk into the mix, who wants his hands in just about everything. And now you got a whole mess, and you don't really know who's in charge. Now, it was documented over the weekend that Rubio and Musk went at it in a cabinet meeting in which Musk participated. Musk criticized Rubio for his lack of cutting staff here at the State Department. Rubio, to his credit, apparently shot right back at Musk. One of the few times that Rubio apparently has kind of stood his ground in these inter-administration battles here and gave it right back to Musk, all while Trump watched them duel it out. Trump, in the end, according to reports, said Rubio's doing a great job, and he stuck with him here and really didn't allow Musk to take over the conversation. Other cabinet secretaries started pushing back as well and kind of minimized Musk's role here. And Trump said over the weekend that Musk has kind of more limited powers, and it'll be the cabinet secretaries, including Rubio here at State, who determine policy and staffing cuts and things of that nature. But still, you have the likes of Steve Witkoff, the Middle East peace envoy. You have Adam Boehler, Trump himself. It won't be the last time Musk sticks his beak in foreign affairs here when it comes to cuts. So I think it's going to be a constant battle for Rubio here in the coming months and maybe years if he lasts that long in trying to kind of hold his own in developing foreign policy and making sure that those he's speaking with, foreign leaders, understand that the words that are coming out of his mouth represent the president and not that of the other persons that may be purporting themselves to lead foreign policy at any given moment.
And yet, briefly, Marco Rubio siding with Elon Musk in that online fight with a Polish diplomat over the role Starlink is playing in the Russia-Ukraine war. Very briefly.
Well, Rubio is a seasoned veteran. He's not going to air dirty laundry here. He's going to keep those private conversations under wraps. But in public, when the foreign minister of Poland criticized Elon Musk for vaguely threatening to pull down Starlink in Ukraine and thereby exposing potentially Ukrainian troops to Russian fire, Polish foreign minister criticized Musk. Rubio stood up for Musk, saying that there was no threat, essentially, and that you shouldn't treat Elon Musk that way. So I think Rubio, more than those in the administration who have less experience in foreign policy, less experience in diplomacy, understands how the game is played. But as always in the Trump administration, sometimes it's Lord of the Flies, and the rules of diplomacy really don't work in many different circumstances.
And bringing us all the latest insights into how that game is played. Thank you so much, senior U.S. correspondent Mike Wagenheim, live from the State Department in Washington. Thank you, Mike. Major General in the Reserves, Eitan Dangat, your take specifically on what is going on in terms of the U.S. role, these direct, apparently one-off talks in Doha. What is your sense? It is a designated terror organization.
Of course. And basically, it's not acceptable. And you are not doing it in a real diplomatic life. But, there is a but. It brought Israel now to send a delegation to Doha, and he moved the negotiation to climb up and to continue. What does it mean? In my opinion, it's very clear to me or to each Israeli civilian that President Trump supporting Israel without any doubt and give the backwind that Israel needs, that include from arms to political level. It's very clear to us. But on the other hand, it's a red flag for the Israeli government and especially to the Prime Minister. The United States didn't like, in my opinion, the fact of the slowness that has been reached this kind of negotiation, while you have people that are every moment, every second, every hour, every day, it's the future of their life to life or death. And in this case, I think United States and President Trump shows Israel what is the real super goal. And I think that without any contact to the way out, and it will not maybe happen, the fact that the ace card, Witkoff, is coming back to the area means that, in my opinion, Benita, we will have to expect to results in the coming few days.
Well, certainly the nation waiting to hear any outcome of any efforts to get the hostages back home. Meanwhile, inside Gaza itself, the IDF says it's identified several terrorists trying to plant a bomb near troops in Gaza City's eastern Shejaiya neighborhood earlier on Monday. Troops opening fire, hitting some of them. And in a separate incident, the IDF saying it spotted 3 terrorists trying to plant a bomb near troops in central Gaza. An Israeli Air Force drone then targeting the 3 close to Nusayrat. So our correspondent Balir Sladin is tracking all developments inside Gaza as we speak. What is known about these incidents earlier on this day?
Yes, so this is happening quite often recently. We see that the IDF is still focusing on these operatives that belong to Hamas or the Islamic Jihad or other factions in the Gaza Strip, that they are trying apparently to get more ready in case of resumption of war. And here they are continuing to plant these explosives in many of the intersections and the places that they expect the IDF to actually enter if the war resumes. And they are once again hit and targeted by an airstrike. Now, this is on one hand, but on the other hand, we are seeing that the Israeli terms for the first phase of the deal, which said that the Rashid road, which is on the coast of the Gaza Strip, is only for those who wants to go back to the north of the Strip by walking, on their feet. That's the term actually. But in recent days, we see that cars are also getting to the north of the Strip without any inspection. They should be going through Salah ad-Din Road in the middle with the inspection from that American, Egyptian, Qatari company. Apparently, Israel is not enforcing enough the ceasefire agreement. And on one hand, yes, they are hitting those operatives. when they see them planting explosives. But on the other hand, the cars apparently make their way to the north of the Strip. No one knows what's in there. Could be even also rockets.
Your insights?
It's a copy-paste to the policy, to the military policy that we see in Lebanon, and not only in South Lebanon, also in the Bekaa or in the other areas, while when you identify and have intelligence and you decide that the authorities in Lebanon are not making the real efforts in order to stop or to cut this kind of military terror activities, the same thing in Gaza. I think that should be the Israel, not even now for the ceasefire, for the future to defend its border. Any area, Gaza, Lebanon, Syria, or inside the area of Jordan, when you are coordinate with them, when you identify such a kind of preparations to create terror, to build terror, you have to react in a military way. This is one of the main lessons. Secondly, concerning Gaza, I think that Israel should do it in any moment, in any place, and not to miss, as it was just now reporting that about those who are moving with the cars, and show a very clear way. It's binary, 0 and 1. So I think I support it. We have to continue. We called it offensive defend.
We certainly wait to see. Tense indeed, and as you say, many suggesting that fighting could resume properly in the coming days or weeks. Gentlemen, stay with us. There's much more to discuss right now, though. We're taking a very quick break. When we get back, trying to get back to some kind of routine. It's back to school for tens of thousands of children in parts of northern Israel, evacuated from their communities near the border with Lebanon. We speak to a farmer about his family's journey back home. Our coverage continues on The Rundown. Back in just 2 minutes. Stay tuned.
Now, more than ever, we are all joining forces at the front lines and the home front in medicine, technology, research and development with hope. And together strengthen the Negev. Ben-Gurion University, the University of the Negev.
Dance, music, and magic immerse you in the story of Jerusalem. This is Jerusalem, an unforgettable musical where the past and present meet. Welcome to the heart of the most sought-after city in the world. A unique experience only at Kikar HaMusika. Reserve now at thisisjerusalem.co.il.
Introducing the brand new I24 News Video On Demand app. You'll have instant access to all our programs, reports, in-depth discussions and expert commentary, all at your fingertips, whenever you want it. So what are you waiting for? Download the I24 News Video On Demand app today. The 7th of October set in motion a chain of events. Today, Israel's enemies are severely weakened, but not defeated, and the balance of power is shifting. This region never rests. And for its own survival, Israel needs to keep its finger on the pulse. If you want to better understand, if you want to hear voices you won't hear elsewhere, then tune in daily to Middle East Now on I24 News.
Welcome back. Our coverage continues. We turn our attention to Damascus now. Syria's government wrapping up a security operation in the country's western coastal region, home to loyalists of ousted leader Bashar al-Assad. The Defense Ministry taking to social media to say security threats had been neutralized in Latakia and Tartus provinces. Reports suggest more than 1,000 people, including many civilians, have been killed in days of deadly violence. More in this report.
Reports of violence continue to circulate even after the Syrian government in Damascus announced the end of its military operation in the coastal provinces of Latakia and Tartus.
We carried out decisive containment operations, tightening the noose around the remaining elements of officers and remnants of the former regime.
President Ahmed al-Shara has vowed to track down the perpetrators of the violence, placing the majority of the blame on parties outside the government-aligned security apparatus.
We find ourselves facing a new danger represented by the attempts of the remnants of the former regime and the external parties behind them to create a new sedition and drag our country into a civil war, aiming to divide it and destroy its unity and stability.
He also accused so-called Assad loyalists and foreign powers of attempting to incite unrest in Syria while promising to hold accountable anyone who has overstepped their authority.
This accusation that Iran was involved in Syria's events is completely baseless and rejected. We believe that pointing the finger at Iran and its allies is a misdirection, an entirely misleading and diversionary narrative. Such claims are absolutely unfounded and represent a cliched and oversimplified approach to developments in Syria, which will do nothing to improve the situation.
4 days of clashes between Assad loyalist militias and government-backed forces were marked by extreme violence, including systematic targeting and revenge killings of Syria's ethno-religious Alawite community. The Syrian Observatory for Human Rights estimates the death toll to stand around 1,300, with 231 members of the government security forces, 250 from pro-Assad armed groups, and at least 830 Alawite civilians. Away from the coast, in northeast Syria's Kurdistan region, the top commander of the Syrian Democratic Forces blamed Turkish-backed paramilitaries and ISIS-aligned factions for the massacres around Latakia. As the violence persists, Syria's new government and its backers will have to confront the old hatreds that continue to hinder lasting stability in the country.
Staggering scenes out of Syria. And for more, correspondent Balir Sladin is tracking developments, and Reuters conducting an exclusive interview with the interim President Ahmed al-Shara. He says the killing of Alawites threatens unity, and he's vowing to bring those responsible to justice. Some irony, some might think. What is the latest? What are you learning?
Yes, just before we mention this interview that Ahmed al-Shara has done, we should talk about what has been published in our Hebrew channel just right now. Guy Uziel, our diplomatic correspondent there, said that a letter that has been sent by the Alawites in Syria was sent to Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and other people in the Israeli politicians. The letter says that please save us from this outrageous new regime, and we will welcome you with songs and flowers. That's what the letter is saying. This letter is also there's a copy of it in I-24 News. And the Foreign Ministry has responded to this, that the letter speaks for itself, which means that the Foreign Ministry is saying that because of the effort that the Foreign Minister of Israel, Gideon Sa'ar, is doing, raising the issue of minorities in Syria over every stage in the world, that's something that, of course, is positive in the eyes of the Alawites, and that's why they are sending this message right now. And it comes as a blow to Iran, to Russia, and to the French also, because they all are supposed to be protecting the minorities and specifically the Shiites and the Alawites in terms of in Syria. So this is, of course, a very huge development right now that we are getting from Syria. They are getting closer to Israel. Ahmed al-Shara wants to ensure the world and also the Syrian people that this that happened over the weekend is something that he has not ordered to actually carry out. Even in the past hour, they are publishing a picture of the two people that carried out those atrocities over the weekend. They were arrested, and they are saying that they will be charged as well. We've seen also videos from Latakia of people talking about unity, and of course showing that business as usual is in the coastal areas after the completion of the operation. So we see that he is very concerned, first with the minorities in Syria, second with how the world sees him, because his main goal is lifting the sanctions.
Well, how the world sees him is that he's wearing a suit now, but that, Eitan Dangot, doesn't change one's ideology, and that is the point being made by Gideon Sa'ar, the foreign minister.
And above it also, this is, I think, the foggy and smoking situation in this area. And this is the answer why Israel has to be very careful and to continue to keep strategic places, geographical, on the ground, inside Syria, that is like at the past, the way to be a threat towards Israel in the future. And I think situation in Syria is very sensitive and very unclear. When you're taking the Kurds, the Alawites, the Sunnis or the Shias, and you add to it the new main partners to Ashara, like Turkey, and you see trying by Iran, it means that this unstabilized situation will continue. What we have to do. I'm not afraid to create any kind with a new friendship with such groups that bring a future to the area, because all the area is bubbling. And I think that what we see is the answer to the world concerning what you start to ask me, whether ideology is above all or whether the situation has changed. As it's looking now, Shara is not going only to continue on his way to create a radical country. A radical country in Syria, it means besides what he's doing, 1,000 people has been killed and he's called for unity now. So it means, I hope you study the lesson. On the other end, it means that we have to study. And in my opinion, we have to demand and be not a direct involvement, but have to say our policy and words to the other countries that involve in Syria in order to create balance. And Israel, as it looks now, will have a big problem in the medium range with this kind of radical activity if we not put to him borders or kind of a limit to his way of control the country. What does it mean? Israel has to continue with his defense offensive way inside Syria and also between Syria and Lebanon.
One certainly wonders too about the international condemnation, or perhaps lack of international condemnation. A developing situation. Stay with us, gentlemen, as we turn our attention now to the West Bank. A baby has been lightly injured in a rock-throwing incident in recent hours. The IDF says a terrorist threw rocks at a vehicle near Huwara. The baby was treated by medics on the scene. Major General in the Reserves, Eitan Dangot, you know the West Bank so well. These rock-throwing incidents are not new to the region, but it is such a volatile part of the region as we speak. Your concerns right now?
First of all, stones is a killing weapon, and we have to open a fire towards those who are trying to kill babies or others while they are making ambush with such stones. Secondly, West Bank is now, in my opinion, the serious area while you are fighting there against groups of terror, against terror that is looking inside the Ramadan. We are going towards the second weekend of the Ramadan, and we are entering to the second half while the religious emotions, as all the years, impact inside the West Bank, we are entering towards a very sensitive, bubbling time. It means that the fight inside West Bank, intelligence with other units will has to continue staying in those areas and have offensive activities specifically against those terror groups, especially in the north part of the West Bank.
Meanwhile, the counter-terrorism operation inside the West Bank continues. Gentlemen, stay with us. As promised earlier, trying to get back into some kind of routine. It's back to school for tens of thousands of children in parts of northern Israel after families started returning to their communities close to the Lebanon border in recent days. They had to evacuate more than 17 months ago as Hezbollah showed its support for Hamas after the October 7th onslaught, launching near-daily rocket and drone attacks on northern communities. So for more, it's a pleasure to welcome Omri Nathans, resident of Kibbutz Matsuva in northern Israel, south of the town of Shlomi. Thank you so much for joining us. Evacuated from your home on October 8th, returning some 10 days ago now, more than 16 months as an evacuee with your family. How did it feel to get back home?
Well, obviously it feels great. The kids are very happy. They were very anxious to be back home. My mom will be back at the end of this week, and this will make things even better. And, you know, it's not quite there yet as it was before. I don't know if it will be, but for sure everyone are trying. Public transportation and healthcare, etc. You know, it's not normal yet, but it's all on the way.
Well,
we're trying to get there.
Is enlightening and positive to know that at least the wheels are in motion, so to speak. I understand you have 3 children, but that not all school classes have resumed in the original locations. What was back to school like for your family?
I tell you, actually, at the beginning of this year, during the war, they were also changing, and obviously the year before. So they had to move a few times from school, from their normal, let's say, school. At the beginning of this year, 2 out of 3 of the school that my kids go to have opened in a, let's say, displaced location, but they still there. You know, the whole school as it was as one organ moved to further from the border. So they don't have, they will not return in this year. And it caused some problem with transportation, obviously, but still it's better to be home, you know, and the schools are on their way also to go back to normal, let's say, normal school.
So important for everybody to try to get back to some kind of routine. Thank you so much for speaking to us. May you all be safe. Appreciate you speaking to us. Omri Nathans, resident of Kibbutz Matsuva. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Have a pleasant evening.
You too. So many people trying to get back to some semblance of normality. And thank you to our studio guest, Major General in the Reserves, Eitan Dangard, correspondent by Sladin. Appreciate your insights on all these developments on this day, as always. Appreciate it. And now, further afield, a disturbing development down under. Australian police have discovered a fake plan to attack a Sydney synagogue using a caravan of explosives. The fabricated plan was apparently the brainchild of an organised crime network hoping to divert police resources. Authorities say they found explosives in a trailer in January that could have created a blast wave of around 130 feet, along with the address of a synagogue in the city. But police confirming today that the discovery was part of a criminal con job. Police are yet to make any arrests over the fabricated plot, but wanted to go public with the information to provide comfort to the Jewish community in Sydney. Take a listen.
We are now confident that these tip-offs were fabricated and the caravan plot was an elaborate scheme contrived by organised criminals domestically and from offshore. There were several people who had different levels of involvement in this fake terrorism plot, but put simply, the plan was the following: organise for someone to buy a caravan, place it with explosives and written material of anti-Semitic nature, leave it in a specific location, and then, once that happened, inform law enforcement about an impending terror attack against Jewish Australians. Regardless of the motivation of those responsible for this fake plot, this has had a chilling effect on the Jewish community. This twisted, self-serving criminality has terrorised Jewish Australians. What organised crime has done to the Jewish community is reprehensible, and it won't go without consequences.
Reprehensive indeed. Now, there have been a spate of anti-Semitic arson and vandalism attacks in Sydney and in Melbourne since October 7th, with the targeting of homes, schools, synagogues and vehicles. Investigations continue. Now, US immigration agents have arrested one of the main leaders of the anti-Israel protests at Columbia University as President Donald Trump follows through on his promise to crack down on these demonstrations. Correspondent Nicole Zedek has the details.
Columbia University, what became the forefront of the anti-Israel campus protests, now the first stop for President Donald Trump's campaign promise to crack down on the pro-Palestinian protesters.
Those who support designated terrorist organizations, including Hamas, threaten our national security. The United States has zero tolerance for foreign visitors who support terrorists. Violators of U.S. law, including international students, face visa denial or revocation and deportation.
That's exactly what's happening to one of the main leaders of the Columbia University encampments, Palestinian graduate student Mahmoud Khalil.
On March 9, 2025, in support of President Trump's executive orders prohibiting anti-Semitism and in coordination with the Department of State, U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement arrested Mahmoud Khalil, a former Columbia University graduate student. Khalil led activities aligned to Hamas, a designated terrorist organization.
Khalil had been one of the most prominent faces of last year's pro-Palestinian demonstrations at Columbia and acted as a negotiator between school administrators and the protesters.
Once again, our movement here, when they tried to clear it last week, we prevailed. If they want to once again bring NYPD or any law enforcement, we will prevail. Our movement is not only this encampment, it was not that encampment. Our movement is very, very large.
Although he graduated in December, he was still active in the most recent Barnard College library takeover, according to social media posts. His attorney, Amy Greer, claims ICE agents said they were revoking Khalil's student visa. But when told he graduated in December and was in the U.S. with a green card, the agent said they were revoking that too. The arrest comes one day after the Trump administration canceled roughly $400 million worth of government contracts and grants awarded to Columbia University over the school's handling of student protests and anti-Semitism, all as President Trump follows through on his threats to detain and deport campus disruptors.
Turning to the role UNRWA has played in Gaza, specifically during the war. As Israel works to have the UN Relief and Works Agency for Palestinian refugees banned, questions are being asked as to which agencies could take its place. And just a short while ago, UNRWA Commissioner General Felipe Lazzarini sharing his concerns about a possible collapse of the agency and what that would mean for Lebanon, Jordan, Syria, the West Bank, Jerusalem and the Gaza Strip. Take a listen.
This is a time of tremendous geopolitical uncertainty. For UNRWA, the statu quo is no longer an option, but we have a choice to make, these member states, international community. We can allow the agency to implode due to the fierce disinformation campaign, the Knesset legislation, and the suspension of funding by key donors. Collapse, I believe, would create a dangerous vacuum in the occupied Palestinian territory and send shockwaves through Jordan, Lebanon and Syria.
Meanwhile, an update on the billion-dollar lawsuit against UNRWA in New York. The UN Palestinian Relief Agency is being sued by dozens of Israelis who accused it of aiding and abetting the October 7th terror onslaught in southern Israel. A complaint was filed in the U.S. District Court in Manhattan 9 months ago now. The 101 plaintiffs include hostages, survivors of the Nova Festival onslaught, and families of people murdered during the terror rampage. It's alleged UNRWA knew some of its personnel were members of Hamas, that its staff had taken part in the terror attacks and had held Israeli people hostage. It's also alleged that UNRWA helped radicalize a Palestinian population into supporting terror against Israel through its textbooks. So for more, it's a pleasure to welcome to studio Avery Sammet, founding member of the company Amini LLC, based in New York and the lead trial counsel in this case. He's obviously visiting the country right now, so welcome. This $1 billion lawsuit pending in New York, but you specifically have been meeting with families implicated and involved in this case, affected by this case. Talk to us about what you are learning.
Thank you. It's been very moving to be here and to meet with families who have lost relatives, who've lost children, who have lost homes, who've really lost their entire lives. Very impactful to see that. I mean, just both as a human being, but also in the case. You know, I think it really drives home what we're trying to establish in this lawsuit, that UNRWA really should not have done the actions that it took. This didn't need to happen, and they should not have provided the support that they did to an organization that had these self-professed goals for a long time.
We know that Yonatan Samarano was shot and abducted by an UNRWA employee on October 7th. We know that an UNRWA teacher held an 84-year-old hostage, Dietza Hyman, captive. And we also know now that Emily Damari was held captive in an UNRWA building. It seems the evidence is abundantly clear.
Well, in addition to that, you know, we allege that the policies that were instituted at UNRWA, at the very top of the organization, not just individuals in Gaza, but the policies were designed to support Hamas. We've alleged that they built Hamas headquarters underneath the UNRWA headquarters, that they put rocket launchers in the UNRWA schools to protect them from attack, that they transferred $20 million a month in US dollar bills to Gaza so that Hamas could use it for smuggling, that they instituted a jihadi curriculum on top of the regular curriculum. And so, you know, we've alleged that it wasn't just individuals in Gaza, but that the leaders of this organization as a whole were enacting these policies.
How does this lawsuit help, though? What is the best outcome from a case like this, unprecedented as it is?
It's a civil lawsuit. We're seeking monetary damages for the victims. It's the only thing that we can seek. We're a civil plaintiff. We're not the government, but we hope that this can, one, provide some measure of justice for these people, and number two, we hope that this will convince organizations like UNRWA not to do these acts in the future.
And how does the new Trump administration impact not only this case, but what happens to UNRWA afterwards? We know Donald Trump's views on agencies like UNRWA. What does it look like from your vantage point?
From my very narrow vantage point, you know, the Trump administration, they filed a letter in our case. They've asked for additional time to review the position regarding immunity that the previous administration took. So we're hopeful that they will change that position and support our position in the lawsuit.
We also know that some members of staff from UNRWA were said to have been fired. Is there any proof that that in fact did happen?
Well, I'm not 100% sure about that, but I'll tell you that, again, the people that made the policy decisions to put the headquarters in their headquarters, to send this cash, dollar bills to Gaza, those people haven't been fired. Those people are still there.
So what is the response so far, to your knowledge, from UNRWA?
The response has been very minimal from my perspective. Their papers in court have only said simply that they should be immune from these actions, from aiding and abetting mass murder and mass rape and these atrocities, that's really been their response in court, that they should be immune from that.
And they should be immune. Why exactly?
Well, they're claiming that they have immunity. And by the way, immunity just means that they can't be sued, they can't be held responsible. They are claiming that they should have it because they're affiliated with the United Nations. And we say they don't have immunity under that treaty. And even if they did, no one is immune from these acts.
And very briefly, when you look at the end goal of a case like this, what kind of timeframes are you looking at realistically?
It's hard to say. Cases like this tend to play out over a number of years. There may be appeals. It really depends on the actions of UNRWA. And I would encourage them to, nothing stops them from compensating these victims today. So we're going to do our best to bring it to a conclusion.
Well, certainly people in this part of the world keenly watching developments with this case. Avery Sammet, founding member of the company Amini LLC, based in New York. Thank you very much for being here in studio. Appreciate you speaking to us here on The Rundown. And that is a wrap for this edition of The Rundown. I'm Benita Levine in Tel Aviv. Thank you for watching. Stay tuned. This is I-24 News.
Introducing the brand new I-24 News Video On Demand app. You'll have instant access to all our programs, reports, in-depth discussions and expert commentary, all at your fingertips, whenever you want it. So what are you waiting for? Download the I-24 News Video On Demand app today. The 7th of October set in motion a chain of events. Today, Israel's enemies are severely weakened, but not defeated, and the balance of power is shifting. This region never rests. And for its own survival, Israel needs to keep its finger on the pulse. If you want to better understand, if you want to hear voices you won't hear elsewhere, then tune in daily to Middle East Now on I-24 News. Want to stay on top of the news no matter where you are? Introducing I-24 News' brand new news website. On our website, you'll find all the latest articles, interviews and live broadcasts. Everything you need to know right at your fingertips, whenever you want it. So what are you waiting for? Download the I-24 News app today.
Everybody ready?
and welcome to Jewish World Weekly on I-24 News. I'm Emily Francis. Every week, we're focusing on stories, issues, and personalities of Jewish interest here in Israel and in the diaspora, the global Jewish community. And we start with our top 5 items in the Jewish world, presented by Nicole Zedek. Hi, Nicole.
Thanks, Emily. Here are the top 5 items in the Jewish world this week. It was a historic night for Jews in Hollywood at the 97th Academy Awards. Adrian Brody and Mikey Madison won Best Actor and Best Actress, marking the first time in decades that Jewish actors have swept both top categories. Best Supporting Actor went to a co-star in the film A Real Pain, which is about Jewish cousins visiting the Majdanek concentration camp, while The Brutalist, which explores a Holocaust survivor's experience with anti-Semitism in America, won for Best Cinematography and Score. Russia says it thwarted a terror attack on a Jewish institution in the Moscow metro. A Central Asian-born suspect planned to detonate explosives but was killed in a shootout with security forces. He had pledged allegiance to an unnamed terror group and allegedly intended to join its ranks in Afghanistan after the attack. The Kremlin says the incident highlights ongoing security threats to Jewish communities in the region. Israel has ended its diplomatic boycott of several European far-right parties, despite their histories of anti-Semitism allegations. Foreign Minister Gideon Saar announced that Israel will now engage with France's National Rally, Sweden Democrats, and Spain's Vox, like any other political party. The move follows their vocal support for Israel and commitments to combat anti-Semitism, though critics remain skeptical of their transformation. Kosher food prices have surged globally, with inflation and supply chain disruptions driving up costs. In the U.S., some kosher staples are now 20% more expensive than last year, making it harder for Jewish families to afford traditional diets. Reports also say that the U.S.-Canada tariff war may raise kosher food prices by 60%. And Adidas has sold its last remaining Yeezy sneakers, ending its liquidation of the brand tied to Ye, formerly known as Kanye West. The company cut ties with Ye in 2022 after his anti-Semitic remarks, leading to massive losses. Adidas has since pledged part of the Yeezy sale proceeds, totaling $690 million this year, to groups fighting anti-Semitism, including the Anti-Defamation League. Those are your top 5 items in the Jewish world this week. Back to you, Emily.
The famous diary of Anne Frank has withstood the test of time for over 80 years after she started writing it. In the last year and a half, global anti-Semitism and anti-Israel vitriol has risen to alarming levels. And now, for the first time in history, Anne Frank's famous hiding place is on full display in New York City's Union Square. And it is something that opened on the end of January's International Holocaust Remembrance Day, which also marked 80 years since the liberation of Auschwitz. Joining us now from Amsterdam is Tom Brink, the head of collections and presentations at the Anne Frank House. Hello, and thank you for being here. Last time was during COVID.
Hello. It was, yeah. Thank you for having me.
Yes. So this is definitely something you have all been working hard on. I know the plans were in the works also before October 7th. So talk about the, first of all, since October 7th, we know as many as 1 million people come a year to the location in Amsterdam. Have you seen more people seeking to be educated, or has it been tense?
That's hard to say. You know, the tickets for the museum are sold out almost every day throughout the year. And that was before October 7th, and that still is the case after October 7th. So it's really hard to measure whether demand has increased and if there really is a post-October 7th effect.
Well, the fact is it's full
I wouldn't
still.
dare to say. It's full still, absolutely, yes. We have about 1.3 million visitors a year.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, that says a lot. At least, you know, it is something still, of course, so relevant. So let's talk about the exhibition in New York. It's in Union Square. Again, I know it wasn't planned. I mean, it was planned before October 7th, but I guess the timing has made it that much more important now.
Yeah, I think we can say that. Although we planned it, we've been working on this for a couple of years actually, and that is the reason for that is actually twofold. On the one hand, it is, as I just said, we're almost always sold out. The museum is almost always sold out, and so we know that many of the people coming to Amsterdam would like to visit the museum, but tickets are sold out, so they can't. But also, there's many people who can simply not travel to Amsterdam because of different reasons, and we have been looking into ways to kind of bring the story to them as well. But this is more like I would say like a logistical reason. But then again, we see that anti-Semitism has been on the rise for years now, for the last years, and that is, I think, the most important reason why we wanted to do something outside Amsterdam, and this exhibit is one of the examples that really, helps us bring across this story to a different audience, not only in Amsterdam.
Yeah. So you guys were able to recreate Anne Frank and her family's hiding place, you know, the famous attic that we all know about. So tell us about that. And also there's a lot of archival materials that haven't been seen before that have been become part of this exhibition. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, absolutely. And although, the recreation of the hiding place has understandably gained a lot of interest and attracted a lot of interest, but the exhibition is actually much more than that. The entire exhibition spends, I think, almost a century covering the Frank family's history from the early 20th century in Frankfurt. So that is before the rise of Hitler, and that was when the family was still a well-to-do Jewish and German family. As Otto always said, we were as Jewish as we were German. That is where the exhibition starts. And then in 1929, after the economic crisis, and also the political and social crisis in Germany starts, we see that Jews are all of a sudden, more or less, they are like a problem, and they are the scapegoat for everything that goes wrong. And well, that is what we all tell in this exhibition. And then they have to flee to Amsterdam, and this is kind of, if you say, this is kind of I would almost say a classic exhibition with lots and lots of original artifacts from the family. And it is like we have silverware, we have tableware from Frankfurt, we have furniture, but also very, very nice, like the small, what we call poetry books, which are kind of like a friendship book where Margot and Anne wrote little poems for their friends in, and all these kind of very, very intimate personal items as well.
That is so interesting. For example,
and it's also that is like, it is a very personal and intimate approach. And that goes for the hiding place as well. What we did is we meticulously recreated the hiding place with all its details, as we know from here in Amsterdam, of course. It is the structure, the wallpaper, but also the pictures from the magazines that then cut out of magazines and stuck to the wall. And also, that is where it really differs from Amsterdam. We refurbished the hiding place in New York, in the exhibition in New York, with furniture and artifacts from the time. These are not the original furniture and artifacts from the Frank family, because that was taken away after they were arrested here in Amsterdam, but they are from the time. So you walk through the rooms and it is like the family and the other people in hiding are still there. And we see that wonderful, and those are original artifacts that show that the people in hiding thought of it as a temporary situation. Margot, for example, did a Latin course. She was preparing for study after leaving the hiding place, and Fritz Pfeffer, one of the people in hiding as well, his Spanish textbook is on display because he prepared for immigration to South America after the liberation. And one piece I personally find very, very touching is Auguste van Pel's festive dress. It is her original dress, and we think that she kept it for after the liberation, to wear it after the liberation. But well, as we all know, it never came to them.
Wow, it's so incredible, and everybody should go see it in New York. Tom Brink, thank you again. Good to see you again, and I look forward to seeing you hopefully in person in the near future.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
President Trump plans to cut more than 90% of U.S. aid, foreign aid contracts, and eliminate $60 billion in overall U.S. assistance around the world. Among the numerous countries who will feel the lasting effects of this decision is Uganda, which has a small Jewish population. Joining us now from Uganda is medical officer Dr. Samson Wamani. Thank you for being here. I know you're working very hard.
Thank you so very much. Thank you for welcoming me on the show.
Of course, of course. So with at least 30% of Africans living in extreme poverty and with the cuts of $60 billion worldwide, how is this going to affect the people of Uganda in particular?
Well, the aid has beaten us hard. We're already having the effects ranging from simple healthcare delivery systems at the village level up to national level. We are having problems in implementing mother-to-child services, immunization. We are having challenges in implementing very basic and very important healthcare systems at village level. We are having problems in the recent Ebola, where we had issues in getting infection prevention and control materials in order to make sure that the disease does not go out of hand. Previously, we had, with USAID, we had everything at our disposal, right from investigations to prevention. So cutting the aid is affecting the lowest person, the person who doesn't know the politics of the world, but we're getting it very hard.
I understand there's more than 2,000 Jews in Uganda. Explain what the community experience is like. How do the the other people in your country treat the Jewish community? Is there fear? Is there violence? Is there anti-Semitism?
No one actually knows us so much. When you say that I'm Jewish, some people think that's a joke. You know,
right?
Hey, Jewish. You must be a white to be a Jew. Mm-hmm. So some people think we're just joking around. And for those ones who know that actually we are Jewish, don't care so much. Actually, for us in Uganda, what separates us is the day and the house of prayer. No one really cares about who is who. We don't even actually introduce ourselves by name. And because most of our names are like English names, Samson, no one thinks it is a Hebrew name. So no one has ever cared. We don't have any of recent. We've not had any problem with our Muslim or Christian neighbors. But back then in 1970s, during the Idi Amin rule, it was more pronounced that people could not mention that they were Jewish. Right now, it's not a problem because of the freedom to worship in the Constitution.
Well, that's comforting to hear that there is a country in the world where where the Jews are not being targeted. So keep up the good work, saving lives, and being such a role model and a leader, not just in your community, but for the world. So thank you.
Thank you so much. It's for me and for the rest of us who are in the healthcare system. It's a calling. It's building and bringing back that smile to somebody who has lost the hope. We feel like it's the mitzvah, which I have to fulfill. I feel that's what I'm made to do.
Wow.
I feel that's the only way I can be useful in this world. You know, when I qualified as a medical officer, I was in Kampala. But I felt like there are so many doctors in Kampala. The best way I can be useful in this world is to go back to the village. I believe Hashem made it by purpose that I should be born in that village.
Wow.
Not in Kampala and not in New York. So the best way is to make sure that you make the world a better place more than you found it.
Wow.
Yeah. Make sure that you bring a smile. Create that difference when you still can. And the time is now.
Wow. Beautiful, beautiful, and so well said. And thank you for bringing a smile to my face as well. So we need to see you here in Israel. Come visit us.
Thank you.
A Jewish American rapper, singer, and songwriter is bringing his beats and rhythms to music lovers around the world. Ari Benjamin Lesser is joining us now via Zoom from Cleveland, Ohio. Welcome, and it must be very cold where you are right now.
So nice to be here, Emily. Thank you. Yeah, it is. It is. It's snowing outside right now.
Oh, wow. So you're warming up everybody's hearts by your tunes. You've been on the scene for quite a while. Tell us kind of how this calling began to bring your own special renditions of King David's Psalms amongst so many other very important works.
Yeah, so I was writing songs for about 7 years before I first came across the Book of Psalms. And, I know that Psalms is part of Jewish tradition, but I never really read what King David was writing about. And once I started to dive into the book, I was like, these would make some pretty interesting lyrics. So I've done a lot of work translating the Psalms into English, really trying to keep them accurate, make them rhyme. And that was the beginning of my journey into Torah, into Yiddishkeit and Judaism, and using my songwriting abilities in that work.
Well, and translating it and then making it rhyme, that's a challenge.
Absolutely. It's kind of like a puzzle. I do some songs that are all original, and those are much more creative. When I'm taking a translation, it's more mathematical. I got to figure out how can I say exactly the same thing in a different language,
right,
and make it rhyme.
Yeah, exactly. Well, you've done it pretty well. Also explain, you came to Israel on birthright, and that was kind of the defining moment for you in your journey.
Well, definitely, it was a big moment. I came birthright, I think, in 2012, and I knew I wanted to explore the Holy Land while I was there. So before I even went, I pushed my return flight to the maximum, which was, I think, 3 months. And I had the first month planned out. The other 2 months, I didn't know what I was going to do. So I ended up traveling around, visiting all the amazing holy spots. Obviously, birthright's incredible. They take you to a lot of great places, but I had to go to Hebron. I wanted to go to Beit Lechem, other places that, they don't take you. And then I ended up learning in yeshiva, both in Yerushalayim and eventually up in Sfat, and staying for a year. I skipped my return flight. I couldn't leave.
Question is, did you get a refund on the difference? Of course not, right?
No, I did not. I had to buy a new flight.
Yeah. So with your work, and given that, you are, out there, you're definitely out there, what has been your experience since October 7th? Are you getting a lot of, anti-Semitism, pushback, hate messages on your platforms? Tell us.
Well, absolutely. I've always dealt with this. I put out a song called Boycott Israel, which was kind of like, boycott Israel if you think that's just, but unless you have a double standard, you must also boycott the rest of the nations with allegations of human rights violations. We're not perfect, but if you think we're the worst, first take a look at the rest of the earth. Don't pick and choose to pick on the Jews. Pick up the paper and read the news.
Wow.
And then I go through like 40 different countries that are all having serious human rights abuse issues. So I did that in 2013 and certainly got lots of anti-Semitism, lots of pushback. But what I'll say is like the level that I would get, like the worst thing I would see then would be maybe like Holocaust denial, right? People who they thought there was some big conspiracy. Now we've moved into like a whole worse area where there's really people who are praising the Holocaust. It's really disgusting stuff that I'm seeing now. And not just a few people. It's, I posted a piece for the 80th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz, just pure, not a political piece, just talking about the history, remembering what happened to our people. And the comments were just shocking and appalling. And if you want, you can look on my Instagram at Ari Lesser. You can see, this is the what Jews on social media are dealing with right now. It's really, really scary stuff.
It's easy for people to post and kind of hide behind the fact that they're on social media and not having to put a public face to it. But what do you do? How do you take the high road, or do you respond? What can you do, if anything?
I've been struggling with this question, and what it really feels like is people are so entrenched. They're so set in their mindset, in their ways. There's not really any more convincing people through rational arguments. People are being irrational. And so I think the best thing for us to do is just to be a light, to just shine our light, to be positive, to show the beauty of Judaism, show the beauty of Torah, and do it in a positive way that really makes people see that a lot of these stereotypes are just lies, are just totally made up. And I think that positivity and light is the best way to disperse the darkness.
Right, of course. So have you gotten any kind of reaction? I know you've recently talked about Kanye. You know, he's been mouthing off again. You also did a compelling post, you know, about the tragedy of what happened to the Bibas family. So, you know, are you able to break through? Are you able to get some kind of opening, even dialogue, even if Kanye were to respond, maybe you could have a conversation with the guy?
Absolutely. Look, I'm a very open person. I'm happy to engage, dialogue, converse with anybody, and I would love to talk with Kanye if he was interested. If he wants to have a little battle rap to him down for that also. If he wants to spit back, hey, I'll clap back. So bring it on, Kanye.
That would be fun. Can you imagine the two of you on stage going at it? Wow. I know that's a pipe dream.
I did a piece. Macklemore's another, you know, sort of anti-Semitic, anti-Zionist rapper that, you know, has been doing a lot of nasty stuff lately. So I did a piece for him earlier this year, and I even in my mind I started planning stuff like if he comes back, and then he did. He like posted another video, so I had all this stuff ready to go just as soon as he posted his new thing. So
you got an arsenal. You got an arsenal waiting, and sometimes you'll have to release things by necessity, not by choosing when.
Absolutely, absolutely. I prefer to stay positive. I prefer to spread joy. But if these anti-Semites are going to keep opening their mouths in a public way, I'm going to respond. You know, I can't help it.
Amazing. Well, Ari Lesser, thank you so much for being here, and keep up the good work, and come to Israel soon with a non-return ticket like before.
Hopefully Lag BaOmer, but we'll see. We'll see how it goes.
Amazing, amazing. I'll see you in the north for Lag BaOmer.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Have a wonderful day. All the best, guys.
A new housing program in the Galilee is offering lone soldiers much more than just a home. The Humanitarian Educational Center wants to make sure when lone soldiers leave their home countries to come serve in the IDF, they have a community and are supported every step of the way. I-24 News correspondent Nicole Zedek heads to Kibbutz Humanitarian for a look at their new initiative.
Being here is really for the future of Israel and also for our students, because it all starts with the individual.
That's the message coming from the Humanitarian Educational Center, located in the Galilee.
The Humanitarian Educational Center really wants to empower and educate the next leadership of the State of Israel as a pluralistic leadership.
That's what they teach at their Mechina, or pre-army gap year program, at Kibbutz Humanitarian.
Everybody who's here is here because they're looking for more, and they want to be here, and they know that they have an impact and they have a responsibility to the Israeli society.
While the Mechina is in its 13th cohort, there's a new mission also in the works.
Because the connection between the Jewish people and the Jewish state for us is so natural, and we need that connection because we're that togetherness is who we are. We decided to build a parallel program, really beside the Mechina, for lone soldiers.
A lone soldier is an immigrant who enlists in the Israeli military without any family in the Jewish state.
I came as a Jew from overseas, and I knew that I wanted to strengthen my identity, and I wanted to learn Hebrew and to know what it was to be Israeli before I drafted into the army. That was my dream, was to draft into the army, and I knew that I had to do the preparation.
Morty participated in the Mechina before enlisting in the army, but when he was a lone soldier, there was no option for housing.
So 4 years on, sometimes I forget how hard it really was. How hard it really is to finish the army, leave the army Thursday night at 8 o'clock, have to go somewhere to some family that I don't really know at the edge of the country, come with all my laundry like here, dump it on them, and then they make dinner for you, so you have to be nice and you have to sit and all that, and it's all great, but really all you want to do is go to sleep and not talk to anyone.
Without a home base, he was couch surfing nearly every weekend during his time in the IDF.
My story, I really am thankful and appreciative of all those people who did help me, because without them it would be impossible. But looking back, I mean, I can only dream about a framework that would guide me from the day I landed to the day I was released, and to help me reintegrate again all those things that I did by myself the hard way.
Well, lone soldiers, are released from the army, they stay lone. They stay lone, lone release soldiers. They don't have a family here. They don't have a home here. It's important for us to accompany these lone soldiers when they're released from the army, to accompany them 10 years ahead, 20 years ahead. We want those lone soldiers that want to be a part of Israel. We know how hard it is.
The vision for the new Lone Soldier Initiative came to light with the help of a former lone soldier.
So Michael Greenberg came here as a lone soldier in the late 60s, 68, and joined the paratroopers. Being a lone soldier, he wanted to build those homes for those lone soldiers, and he was a conservative Jew. So it just came all together here when he came here.
That's one of the things that makes the Hanaton Educational Center so unique.
There's right now only two solutions. You go to a secular kibbutz or to an Orthodox kibbutz, which, by the way, is great, is magnificent, but there's more to that. There's more richness to that. We have to talk about a Jewish perspective doesn't hold only extremes, but can hold a wide range of identities, whether you're secular or reform or conservative or Orthodox or modern Orthodox or not modern Orthodox. So we want to open that, and we want to give people a sense of home.
This is the first lone soldier housing for conservative and reform Jews, a middle ground offering options for everyone.
We decided to really build them a physical home, and with this community would give them their spiritual home.
I think, one, the kibbutz offers like a more small-scale opportunity to integrate into society. It also offers community, which is something that a lot of people look for no matter where they are.
Providing a much-needed community to the lone soldiers leaving theirs behind to serve